The day after it happened, I acknowledged that this was an act of terrorism. And what I pledged to the American people was that we would find out what happened, we would make sure that it did not happen again, and we would make sure that we held accountable those who had perpetrated this terrible crime.
Mr. President, you didn't really call it terror from the get-go. Remember when you said this? Because we do.
Here's what happened. You had a video that was released by somebody who lives here, sort of a shadowy character, who is an extremely offensive video directed at Muhammad and Islam. We had nothing to do with the video. We find it offensive. It's not representative of America's views.
Then I heard Hillary Clinton say that it was an act of terrorism. Is it? What do you say?
Well, we're still doing an investigation.
This is a president who spent $80,000, Eric, on ads in Pakistan, apologizing on behalf of the United States for that video. So if it was terrorism, then that's a very confusing thing and a waste of money.
There's two basic questions on this. One is the stand-down order. Was it given and who gave it? And the second one is then was the question of the, not just the talking points, but the whole deleting of the truth and the replacing it with a lie that is told over and over again.
Brand new reports reveal that the administration message, those infamous talking points on the deadly consulate attack, were revised 12 times. All right, keep that number in mind. They were revised 12 times before they were handed over to Ambassador Susan Rice to share with the country on the Sunday talk shows. What's more, these changes were made as the White House and the State Department were trading emails with the intel community over what the ultimate talking points handed to Susan Rice should say. But that is not the story the White House Press Secretary Jay Carney told us last November.
What the White House and the State Department have made clear that the single adjustment that was made to those talking points by either of these two institutions were changing the word consulate to diplomatic facility because consulate was inaccurate. Those talking points originated from the intelligence community. They reflected the IC's best assessments of what they thought had happened.
The single quote, I mean, the single change that the State Department and the White House made, they've made clear one change, and that was consulate to diplomatic facility. That's just not true. This is the CIA initial draft, Steve Hayes reporting in the Weekly Standard last weekend. CIA's initial draft. It talked about this attack being linked to Islamic extremists, Ansar al-Sharia, and a need for jihad, and warned and reminded them that at least 5 other recent attacks had taken place in Benghazi. Victoria Nuland of the State Department responds, according to your reporting, that the State Department has serious concerns with that draft of the talking points, pointing out that Congress will use them to, quote, beat up the State Department for not paying attention to warnings. So what happens next? Pop up the second one, but watch it. CIA's next draft comes. All right, they delete the references to Ansar al-Sharia, this al-Qaeda offshoot, but Nuland writes back, the changes did not resolve all of my issues or those of my building leadership. And then next you see the White House weighing in saying, the State Department concerns must be taken into account. The CIA did an initial version, and then they did a second version. But look at, and then they did the third version. Now we know they did 12 from Jonathan Karl's reporting. But look, just look at the version between 2 and 3. We've highlighted it, and then they've got black lines through the words that got taken out after Victoria Nuland over at the State Department was saying how concerned she was. So all that gets wiped, gets scrubbed, and you can see the shortened version of version number 3. And now take a look at full screen number 2, some of the terms that got taken out. What got taken out? Jihadists, Islamic extremists, threat of extremists linked to al-Qaeda in Benghazi, at least 5 other attacks in Benghazi, and concerns that previous surveillance had taken place of the consulate in Benghazi. That all got removed, and that, Steve, is what we now believe led Susan Rice to go out on the Sunday talk shows and say, don't know anything about terrorism, but they were very upset over a video, and that's what led to the protests.
The whole issue of this, of talking points, frankly, throughout this process has been a sideshow. And the emails that you allude to were provided by us to congressional committees. They reviewed them several months ago, concluded that, in fact, there was nothing afoul in terms of the process that we had used. And suddenly, 3 days ago, this gets spun up as if there's something new to the story. There's no there. So the whole thing defies logic. And the fact that this keeps on getting churned out, frankly, has a lot to do with political motivations. We have been very clear about throughout was that immediately after this event happened, we were not clear. We have been very clear about throughout was that immediately after this event happened, we were not clear who exactly had carried it out, how it had occurred, what the motivations were. It happened at the same time as we had seen attacks on U.S. embassies in Cairo as a consequence of this film.
Why the issue has flared up again to the point where it is once again consuming one of the most valuable commodities a president has, his time, standing alongside a foreign leader today, no less. Well, his account omitted last Wednesday's explosive House oversight hearing and the disclosure of the contents of the 12 versions of the Benghazi talking points that were prepared by his top aides. Those talking points delivered by UN Ambassador Susan Rice on the 16th of September, just 5 days after the attacks, of course, pressed a false narrative of the Benghazi attacks.
Our initial information, and that includes all information, we saw no evidence to back up claims by others that this was a pre-planned or premeditated attack.
It was delivered to the committee that has exclusive jurisdiction over sources and methods. In other words, covert activities, as though there were secrets in there. They were told they could look at it, but then the agreement was it wouldn't go anywhere else. So when they're looking at, quote, what did the CIA know and when did they know it, they were looking at it in one role where you and I look at this unclassified or should be unclassified information, and we realize that it's just plain a cover-up.
Willing to stand up and engage in a war against radical Islam and admit it's happening? Well, based on what he and other members of his administration have said in the past, well, that seems unlikely. For example, back in 2010, our commander-in-chief was asked by a student in Mumbai what he thought about jihad, and rather than tackle the issue head-on with a clear answer, he instead chose to ramble on, speaking in broad generalities. Now, here's the clip.
What is your take or opinion about jihad?
The phrase jihad has a lot of meanings within Islam, and is subject to a lot of different interpretations. But I will say that, first, Islam is one of the world's great religions. And more than 1 billion people who practice Islam, the overwhelming majority, view their obligations to their religion as ones that reaffirm peace and justice and fairness and tolerance. I think all of us recognize that this great religion, in the hands of a few extremists, has been distorted to justify violence towards innocent people that is never justified.
Now, that clip pretty much says it all. The reality is we face a very real threat from radical Islamists, and this administration, they're just either too naive or too politically correct to say it, to acknowledge it, to realize it. Now, this is a very dangerous, frankly, a pre-9/11 mindset. Well, there are not really many interpretations. That's spin. Jihad equals holy war.
The president denies that we are in a war on terror. That policy stance, that outreach to Muslims, has basically failed.
All right, well, I want to hear you say this. They requested additional security. It was denied. That's a failure. During the attack, they didn't send help that was waiting in Tripoli, a C-130, to assist these guys. That was a failure. And afterwards, they got the story right until they changed the talking points for political purposes. You agree with all that? Have any disagreements?
I'm totally in disagreement.
Where?
First of all, we know from the military, you know, from Defense Secretary, former Defense Secretary Panetta, from General Ham, you know, we can go down the line. The Joint Chiefs of Staff all have said the military made this decision, not the State Department, not the White House, and
so
they
we
made
don't have
the
a commander-in-chief. We don't have a chain of command.
Their people in danger.
Wait a minute. We don't have a commander-in-chief or a chain of command, and that somebody along the way, we don't know who, 8 months later, made a decision and told them to stand down while Americans were under fire and getting killed in Benghazi. Is that what you're going to say?
You know, you're just wrong. I mean, again, nobody was under fire at the time. The attack starts at 9:45.
And keeps
Our
going.
first team gets there at 5 a.m.
All right,
So,
let's
you
go
know,
to- let's
there was
go
a
to the
second attack, and then people, even then, what we heard today was people in Tripoli wanted to send then commandos, 4 commandos in,
And they were
but
told
they
to
wouldn't have
stand
got there
down.
until after that second
Excuse
attack,
me.
Sean.
Let's play the videotape from earlier today. Let's get it right.
We determined that we needed to send a second team from Tripoli to secure the airport for the withdrawal of our personnel from Benghazi after the mortar attack.
But were any of these U.S. military personnel not permitted to travel on a rescue mission or relief mission to Benghazi?
They were not authorized to travel.
What happened with those personnel?
They remained in Tripoli with us. The medic went with the nurse to the hospital to lend his skills to the treatment of and care of our wounded.
How did the personnel react to being told to stand down?
They were furious.
Everything that Hillary Clinton said at that January hearing, where all of the sycophants in the media praised her for her brilliant performance, was a lie. Lies, lies, lies. Yeah, they are going to get you, Hillary. Eventually they will. You will be held accountable.
The president of Libya said it was a terror attack. Nobody said it was spontaneous. I never heard of a spontaneous demonstration. Oh, let me pull out a rocket-propelled grenade out of my back pocket. I just happen to be here spontaneously. But that's what they told us. Now, my conclusion is they did this because it goes against their narrative. They were 2 months out of a presidential election, and they purposefully, willingly lied to you, all the people watching this program, the American people, so they could get elected and maintain power.
On September 12th, right after the Benghazi attacks, where we had 4 dead Americans, including the personal representative of the President of the United States, lying dead in Libya at the hands of Islamic terrorists, what does he do? He gets on Air Force One, he goes to Las Vegas, of all places, for a campaign fundraiser. He is campaigning all of the time. Everything is politics. Governing is way down the list.
There is about this White House, what I've said on this program to you before, an attitude of Chicago gangster politics, which runs everything.
I obviously was on the road all of last week, and so I didn't see the hearings, but I followed them, and I'm getting a summary report of everything that's taken place. What I've seen thus far, I have to tell you, after all of the hearings that I took part in as chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee, all of the briefings that I took part in, many of which were classified, I really haven't learned anything new.
Really?
And we don't have time to be playing these kinds of political games here in Washington. We should be focused on what are we doing to protect them. And that's not easy, by the way. And it's going to require resources and tough judgments and tough calls. And there are a whole bunch of diplomats out there who know that they're in harm's way. And there are threat streams that come through every so often with respect to our embassies and our consulates. And that's not just us, by the way. The British have to deal with the same thing. And we've got a whole bunch of people in the State Department who consistently say, you know what, I'm willing to step up. I'm willing to put myself in harm's way. Because I think that this mission is important in terms of serving the United States and advancing our interests around the globe. And so we dishonor them when we turn things like this into a political circus. What happened was tragic. It was carried out by extremists inside of Libya. We are out there trying to hunt down the folks who carried this out, and we're trying to make sure that we fix the system so that it doesn't happen again. Okay.